911, what's your emergency?
A desperate 911 call. A knife. A young woman's final moments inside a Corpus Christi gas station. Within hours, police arrested Carlos DeLuna. But was he the killer or a man executed for another's crime? This is the story of Wanda Lopez and the trial that ended in death row. Corpus Christi, Texas, February 4th, 1983, 8 p.m. The fluorescent lights of the Sigmore gas station hummed against the night air. Wanda Lopez, 24, stood behind the counter, her hair pulled back, her uniform neat. She was alone on shift, a single mother working late to keep her life steady. At 8:09 p.m., she picked up the phone and dialed 911. Her voice was tense, urgent. "There's a man outside with a knife. He's scaring me." The dispatcher asked questions, but Wanda's words carried the weight of fear. She stayed on the line, watching the glass door. Minutes later, the man entered. Carlos DeLuna, 20 years old, walked in wearing a gray shirt and carrying a knife. He moved quickly, closing the distance between them. Wanda's voice rose on the call. "He's here now." The line went silent. The attack was sudden. Witnesses outside saw Wanda struggle, her body pressed against the counter. She screamed, but the sound was muffled by the station walls. The knife struck her chest. She collapsed, clutching her side, blood staining her uniform. By 8:15 p.m., Wanda lay on the floor, gasping. Customers rushed to the door, but the attacker fled into the night. The phone dangled from the counter, the dispatcher still listening to static. Police arrived within minutes. They found Wanda bleeding heavily, her body near the register, the knife gone. The scene was stark, a trail of blood across the tiles, a phone off the hook, a young woman's life ending in the place she worked. Paramedics tried to save her, but the wound was fatal. At 8:19 p.m., Wanda Lopez was pronounced dead. The gas station became a crime scene, its fluorescent lights casting a harsh glow over the silence. The killer had vanished, but the trail had already begun. 8:30 p.m. The gas station was sealed with yellow tape. Detectives moved quickly, documenting every detail. The register drawer was open, a few bills missing. The phone still hung from its cord, receiver tilted on the counter. Blood marked the tiles in a trail leading toward the door. Witnesses outside gave their accounts. One man had seen the attacker run north, knife in hand. Another described a young Hispanic male in a gray shirt. Patrol units spread through the neighborhood, scanning alleys and vacant lots. At 9:05 p.m., officers found Carlos DeLuna hiding under a truck less than a mile away. He was sweating, his shirt stained, his hands trembling. He claimed innocence immediately. "It wasn't me. It was Carlos Hernandez." The name meant little to detectives at that moment. They cuffed him and brought him in. Back at the station, evidence began to mount. DeLuna had no money on him, but his clothing matched witness descriptions. A knife was recovered near the crime scene, smeared with blood. Forensic teams photographed it, bagged it, and logged it into evidence. Detectives reconstructed the timeline. Wanda's 911 call at 8:09 p.m., the attack minutes later. Witnesses placing DeLuna fleeing at 8:15, arrest at 9:05. The sequence was tight, the gaps small. In interrogation, DeLuna's story shifted. He insisted another man, Carlos Hernandez, had committed the murder. Detectives pressed him. Where was Hernandez? How did he escape? DeLuna offered no details. His silence deepened suspicion. Meanwhile, forensic teams examined Wanda's uniform. Fibers matched the knife handle. Blood patterns confirmed a close-range stabbing. The autopsy later revealed a single fatal wound to the chest, consistent with the recovered weapon. By midnight, prosecutors were notified. The case was already shaping into capital murder. The victim was a young woman killed during a robbery, with eyewitnesses and physical evidence tying DeLuna to the scene. The investigation moved forward with speed. Detectives prepared statements, secured the crime scene photographs, and logged every piece of evidence. The file grew thicker by the hour. Carlos DeLuna was booked into county jail before dawn. The charge: capital murder. July 1983. The courtroom was crowded. Family members filled the benches, reporters lined the back wall, and Carlos DeLuna sat at the defense table, his face blank, his hands folded. The charge was capital murder. The victim: Wanda Lopez. The prosecution opened with a timeline. They displayed Wanda's 911 transcript, her words trembling. "He has a knife. He's scaring me." They showed photographs of the gas station floor, the bloodstains, the knife recovered nearby. Witnesses had seen DeLuna fleeing. The arrest came less than an hour later. Detectives testified. They described finding DeLuna under a truck, his shirt matching witness accounts. They presented the knife, bagged and tagged, its blade consistent with Wanda's fatal wound. Forensic experts explained the autopsy: a single stab to the chest, deep enough to pierce her heart. The defense countered with a name: Carlos Hernandez. DeLuna's attorneys argued mistaken identity. They claimed Hernandez was the true killer, a man known in Corpus Christi for violence. But no witness placed Hernandez at the scene. No physical evidence tied him to the crime. The jury listened as friends of Wanda testified. They recalled her unease, her fear of the man outside. Neighbors described seeing DeLuna leave calmly, knife in hand. The prosecution emphasized the sequence: Wanda's call, the attack, the flight, the arrest. DeLuna's statements shifted under questioning. At first denial, then silence, then insistence that Hernandez was responsible. The inconsistency weighed heavily. Prosecutors pressed the point. DeLuna had motive, opportunity, and presence. By the end of the week, the evidence stood firm. The jury deliberated less than a day. When they returned, the verdict was clear: guilty of capital murder. The judge read the sentence: death by lethal injection. DeLuna showed no emotion. His eyes stayed fixed on the table, his hands unmoving. Wanda's family wept quietly, holding each other, relief mixed with sorrow. Justice had been declared, but the loss remained. Outside, reporters called it a straightforward case. Inside, the weight of the verdict settled over the room. The trial was over. The path now led to death row. Huntsville, Texas, December 7th, 1989. The prison walls stood heavy against the winter night. Inside, Carlos DeLuna waited in a small cell, hours away from his sentence. He was 27 years old, convicted 6 years earlier of Wanda Lopez's murder. The appeals had failed. The governor's office had declined clemency. The order was final. At 6 p.m., prison staff began the procedure. DeLuna was led from his cell, shackled at the wrists and ankles, escorted down a narrow hallway. Reporters were already seated in the witness room, pens ready, eyes fixed on the glass. Family members of Wanda Lopez had traveled to Huntsville, silent, their grief carried into the chamber. DeLuna's face was calm, expressionless. He repeated the same words he had spoken since his arrest. "I didn't do it. It was Carlos Hernandez." The statement was noted, but the process did not stop. At 11 p.m., he was strapped to the gurney, leather restraints tightened across his arms and legs. The IV lines were inserted, clear tubing running to the lethal injection apparatus. The room was quiet except for the hum of fluorescent lights. The warden asked if he had final words. DeLuna spoke softly. "I am innocent. God knows." His voice carried through the microphone, recorded in the official transcript. At 12:02 a.m., the chemicals began to flow. Sodium thiopentyl first, then pancuronium bromide, then potassium chloride. DeLuna's chest rose once, then slowed. His eyes closed. Within minutes, he was still. The official time of death, 12:12 a.m., December 7th, 1989. Witnesses filed out silently. Reporters wrote their notes, headlines already forming. DeLuna executed for gas station murder. Wanda's family held each other, tears mixing with quiet relief. The state had carried out its sentence. Outside, the prison gates loomed under the night sky. The execution was complete. The case of Wanda Lopez had reached its final chapter in law. But questions lingered. The name Carlos Hernandez remained in the record, unproven, unresolved. For some, justice had been served. For others, doubt had taken root. The execution of Carlos DeLuna closed the legal file, but it did not silence the questions. Within months, attorneys and journalists began revisiting the case. The name DeLuna had repeated. Carlos Hernandez surfaced in police records. Hernandez was known locally, arrested multiple times for violent crimes, often involving knives. Investigators uncovered reports that Hernandez had confessed to friends about killing Wanda Lopez. He had lived blocks from the gas station, frequented the area, and matched the description Wanda gave in her 911 call. Yet during DeLuna's trial, Hernandez was dismissed as a phantom, a fabrication. By the mid-1990s, law reviews and investigative articles questioned whether Texas had executed the wrong man. Forensic re-examinations highlighted gaps. No fingerprints on the knife, no blood on DeLuna's clothing, and inconsistent witness testimony. The timeline was tight, but not flawless. Wanda's family carried the grief quietly. For them, the trial had delivered justice, but the doubts reopened wounds. Each new article, each new claim of wrongful execution, forced them to relive the night of February 4th, 1983. In 2006, the Columbia University Los Tocayos Carlos project published a detailed study. It concluded that Carlos Hernandez was the likely killer and that DeLuna had been a victim of mistaken identity. The report reignited debate about capital punishment, wrongful convictions, and the reliability of eyewitness testimony. Corpus Christi itself remembered Wanda Lopez as a young mother taken too soon. Her photograph remained in family homes, her name in community memorials. But the case became more than a local tragedy. It became a national example of how fragile justice can be when evidence is thin and pressure is high. By the 2000s, documentaries and legal scholars cited the DeLuna case as one of the most troubling executions in Texas history. For some, it was proof that the system had failed. For others, it was a reminder of the risks inherent in capital punishment. The aftermath carried no closure. Wanda Lopez was gone. Carlos DeLuna was executed. Carlos Hernandez died years later, never tried for the crime. The truth remained tangled between testimony, evidence, and silence. The story of Wanda Lopez endures, a young woman's final call, a trial that ended in death, and a legacy of doubt that still haunts the record. Was Carlos DeLuna really the killer? Or did Texas execute the wrong man? Tell us what you believe in the comments below. Your answer could change how this case is remembered.